Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Workforce Labor Economic Development Finance and Policy Committee hearing here for today, April 15th, 2026. I want to welcome everybody here. We've got a couple of bills up today, members, and also we have a presentation from the greater MSP. So I'm looking forward to that, sharing it. First on our agenda, of course, is to take care of our minutes from yesterday, April 14th. Representative Mueller, have you had a chance to look over the minutes and offer a motion?
I did, and I would move that we accept the minutes from April 14th.
Any further questions, members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are carried from April 14th. Our first bill up today, members, is House File 4862. Representative Rymer is here in front of our committee. Welcome, Representative, and the House, the chair will, we're just going to plan on laying this bill over. Why don't you go ahead and explain the bill? And I think you may have some testifiers that are going to come up later on too. So Representative Rymer, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Co-Chair Pinto and members of the committee. So today I'm here to present House File 4862. So last year you all passed, and I think it was great work, the teacher apprenticeship program. And specifically want to thank Representative Mueller, Representative Frazier for leading that effort. I think we're going to create the next generation of great teachers here in Minnesota. In my own district, there's a pretty hard push to make this program work. I have my superintendent here from North Branch, who has been really integral in our local process for that teacher apprenticeship program. So what this bill does is, what we found over the last year was that from a funding perspective, a lot of these teacher apprenticeship programs are trying to get spun up. There was a little bit of confusion about the way that these apprenticeship programs could or would get funded after we passed that bill. Namely, the initial thought was that you would have to reimburse expenses, and that got hard, at least for my program, to not have advance payment for some of these organizations spinning up teacher apprenticeship programs. Since then, I've had a conversation with DLI, and they kind of clarified for me that, well, we can do advance payments in this program. So more or less what I wanted to do was bring a bill that gave clarity, because for about 9 months it was not clear that could happen, and the communication that we had, at least locally, did not make that clear. So what this bill does is allow for DLI to issue advance payments for this program. So with that, I do have a testifier I'd like you to hear from.
Thank you, Representative. If you could please come forward. Thank you for being here this morning. We don't have your name, so please introduce yourself, please, and proceed with your testimony.
All right. Well, thank you, co-chairs, committee members. My name is Sarah Paul. I am the superintendent for North Branch Area Public Schools. I am also the co-chair of the Minnesota Teachers Joint Apprenticeship Teachers Committee. So when we passed, and thank you for the work, and Representative Mueller, thank you, and Representative Frazier, thank you so much for your leadership, and all of you that really championed that we need to have a different strategy for how we're bringing effective teachers into our workforce. Not only as we bring them in so that they can be successful, but then we sustain them and they experience the joy and love of teaching. So proud to be working with the Department of Labor and Industry and across different entities for us to be able to carry this work forward. We were working independently on this as a school district. We ended up joining together with a cohort of districts and creating a nonprofit, a 501c3, that is a joint apprenticeship teachers committee. So the funding is going towards supporting that infrastructure and making sure that our apprentices are supported through tuition, and making sure that we have an infrastructure not only for statewide spread, so this can be of statewide impact, but also to acknowledge the cost that districts put into this just to offset some of that cost. So I feel so well represented by Representative Rymer. He really explained it very well. Innovation takes courage. You were courageous in supporting it with funding. It takes courage for government entities to say, yeah, we're going to tackle this and make sure that we provide that structure for this to be successful. There was just a delay in the funding. So we went, I just want to acknowledge the Initiative Foundation was willing to kind of put forward and do a line of credit. We were trying, to go about all different kinds of solutions, but the best solution comes from the Department of Labor and Industry when they say, you know what, we're following the rules of the Office of Grant Management. We've got a template that we're following for a contract, and they said we will revise the contract in order for those cash advances to happen. So hats off to them. They are great leaders in this work. We would not be anywhere near where we are in terms of really transforming our workforce if it weren't for their partnership. And problems come up when you innovate, and you got to problem solve together. And so I want to really thank all of you, and I want to thank you, Representative Rymer, and thank the Department of Labor and Industry. We're just going to continue moving forward together.
Superintendent Paul, thank you very much for being here. This was a good example of, again, bipartisan work, again, with Representative Mueller and Frazier. They knew the problem was there. We all knew we have to do a different approach to how do we teach our new teachers. The Department of Labor has been very helpful in this area. I think they saw the need early on, too. My comment would be to Representative Rymer, do you have any other testifiers at this time?
No, Mr. Chair, not at this time.
Would you, it sounds like this is going in the right direction. It's sort of been fixed. Do you feel like we need to have labor come up and explain or confirm anything at this point? Just want to make sure that that's an option for you because they are here in the room if you want to do that.
Mr. Chair, I would love for somebody to come up. They've been great to work with the past day and a half getting clarification on this, but more or less I just wanted maybe them to explain how the funding had worked, what the clarification was.
And again, when we pass a bill and we have some tweaks to do following, we just want to make sure we get it right. So this is the purpose of that. So thank you for that. Welcome to the testifying table. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Kate Prushek. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Labor and Industry, and I oversee our Registered Apprenticeship Program. I do want to recognize and thank Superintendent Paul. She has been a great partner as we've worked through this new competitive grant program. So the representative is correct. The Department of Administration's Office of Grant Management, there's a policy 08-08 that gives the agencies the authority to issue advance payments on a case-by-case basis. We do typically use the reimbursement method, reimbursing grantees after costs are already incurred. But we recognize for this Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Program, these are new joint apprenticeship training committees, right? And part of the intent of the legislation and the requirement is the grant funding is to be used to help administer, operationalize the programs. And so they don't have the cash flow to get up and running. So we've been working closely with Superintendent Paul and our other programs to make sure that they have the cash flow that they need via advance payments to get the programs up and running and be successful so those apprentices can get their tuition payments and that the journey workers have access to their stipends. So have appreciated our partnership.
Thank you, Ms. Purchek. Members, there's no other testifiers. I will take it to member questions at this time. And again, Superintendent, if you have any questions, they may have to pose it to you too. So Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
This is not something that I have a depth of knowledge on, so I wanted to just begin by asking first, like who are traditional grant recipients for this? Are they school districts? Are they nonprofit organizations? Are they other workforce training organizations? Can you give, and I don't know, that question might be best answered by the department to kind of give us a lens to this point as to who has come through the competitive grant process.
Ms. Purchek.
Certainly. Thanks for the question, Representative, Mr. Chair. So via the competitive grant program, we had 3 applicants, 2 newly formed joint apprenticeship training committees, including the Minnesota Teacher Apprenticeship, JATC, and Teacher Apprenticeship Minnesota, and we also had an application from Minneapolis Public Schools. So the law does allow us to fund individual school districts who are interested in starting or continuing a registered teacher apprenticeship program, or programs that intend to go statewide and have multiple participating school districts throughout the state. So all 3 of those applicants were well qualified, so we were able to fund all 3.
Any follow-up, Representative Schultz?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, especially sitting on the fraud committee, the OGM standards that we have at play for grants management are really important. I see, you know, Representative Pinto nodding his head, Representative Greenman. We've talked a lot about this in committee. I realize and I understand at this point that there hasn't been that many applicants. I think that if I were to poll the audience around this table, I would likely assume that people have trust in school districts. I have a level of concern with regards to organizations that are just starting up, where we should, approach with some level of caution, just for the sake of grants management for the entire state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, is this being laid over?
Yes, it is.
I wanted to just follow up on this, and this is, I appreciate all the work that's been done. I also appreciate that we are seeing it stood up, and I know the substance of the program, and I share your feeling that the Department of Labor has been a really good partner in this, and I know our authors, with our authors too. And this is actually just a clarification question, maybe for staff, and sort of to follow up on where Representative Schultz is going, is in 16B, there's a whole set of requirements of pre-risk assessments. The way I'm reading this wouldn't touch that, but I just wanted to clarify that that the pre-risk assessment and all of that process that happens before we award the competitive grant, that this bill doesn't impact that.
Are you asking nonpartisan then, maybe to
I think I'm asking nonpartisan.
Okay.
I mean, I
Versus
could ask
labor?
the author, but I think
labor,
I'm
okay.
asking nonpartisan.
Ms. Schaldine.
Chair and members, my understanding is this affects only that they can do advance payment. That's the only change, rather than reimbursement.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Charlene. That is helpful clarification for me, and I appreciate the work.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the questions that everyone's had so far. I have a comment and I do have a question. First, a question for DLI. We've been hearing a lot from North Branch about some of the concerns that they've had about having enough money to be able to do this program. When I went back and looked at the bill language, it didn't say anything about being reimbursement. I'm now understanding that OJM has very specific. None of that was really, we didn't talk about that when we were creating this bill. Has there been any other school districts have come forward to say, hey, we're really concerned about, we're running out of money. We know we've been awarded these finances to do this. Has there any other school districts or organizations that have come forth with some complaints?
Ms. Perchek.
Mr. Chair, Representative, yes, the other JATC that was awarded funding, Teacher Apprenticeship Minnesota, they have also expressed interest in advance payments, excuse me, and we are likely to also issue them advance payments. For Minneapolis Public Schools, they are following the reimbursement model. I think really the distinction is, and the challenge is, Minneapolis Public Schools is a single employer program, and the other two are statewide joint apprenticeship training committees that are trying to serve school districts statewide. So I think those two JATCs really do have demonstrated the need for advance payments.
Did you want to say something, Superintendent Paul? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Part of what's important is to make sure, I'm here representing the Minnesota JATC, which is 14 districts right now would be in this situation as part of our JATC. We also partner with intermediate districts. They received funding through a different grant that was direct funds. So that kind of helps to understand some of the nuances, why you kind of see direct funding and then some real-time supportive apprentices compared to what we have been going through, yet we are embraced that we are taking on innovation. And so we know that we have to work through this together, but that just hopefully sets some context as to what that difference is.
Thank you. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that explanation and for clarification. You know, when Representative Frazier and I were putting this together, one of the concessions that I made, I wanted to give money directly to school districts to let them be able to set this up and start working, because we wanted the transparency and accountability to be done at the most local level. The two things that came out was, one, school districts came to me and said, we don't have the infrastructure to do this. We need some help, and we need someone to be a financial fiscal agent for us. And number two was, hey, we have a strong union presence here in Minnesota. We need to make sure that everyone is represented. Could you please replicate what the trades do, which is through the JATC? And JATCs are heavily successful in the trades and heavily regulated by the federal government. And so I I thank you for being willing to listen and being willing to have this conversation with us. As for the discussions with fraud, setting up a JTC is laborious work. It takes time. And I think that as we start getting concerned, the question or the focus should be not at our school districts that are completely trying to make this work, but where's that middleman? And so we need to start asking that question. And thank you, DLI, for being a good partner with our school districts as we're starting to do this innovation. So that would be my caution as we start looking at this program with a microscope, remembering that I know we're hypersensitive to fraud, and we should be, but let's be very intuitive about where we're going to put that microscope, and knowing that our school districts have been, they're stepping out on a ledge here to do innovation that is being made possible by DLI being able to work with them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. I don't see any other member questions. Co-Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just an observation, which is that this issue of advance payments versus reimbursement, I think is one that, so as you and I, Chair Baker, were been talking to organizations that operate under DEED and DLI grants. I feel like I heard this quite a bit, saying that, our organization's in a very good position to provide services, but boy, it's pretty hard for us to float the cash up front. I mean, the same challenge we're hearing here. There's a balance there against program integrity concerns. I'm not saying that we want to make that switch, but just sort of recognizing that this is a challenge anytime that we're sort of outsourcing public service, something that we're trying to accomplish with public dollars, and just that we need to be aware of that in general. It sounds like this is being laid over. We're not making this particular exception through law now, but to recognize this is not the only organization situation that's facing this. And thanks to the author and to DLI and the testifier for your work in making this happen. It's and then of course to Representative Mueller and Chair Frazier for your work in setting this up in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Seeing no other member questions, thank you for everybody for working on this. Representative Rymer, final comments before we lay the bill over.
Yeah, Chair Baker, members, thank you again. Obviously, I know that this isn't the flashiest bill and really appreciate your time and engagement on it. Again, I want to thank the department, the Deputy Commissioner for taking my calls and explaining, how this process works. I think this is another bill as we lay it over. It's a tool in our tool belt in case any of you hear from your local constituents who are part of this program that maybe we need to revisit this conversation down the road, but I don't think that'll be the case. So thank you all again for taking the time.
Thank you very much. And the chair again we are tabling the bill, laying the bill over House File 4862. Thank you very much, Representative Rymer. Members, I'm going to head up to the testifying table as we look at House File 4598. And just to give a heads up too, we do have a hard stop at 9:55 because of a rules meeting at 10 o'clock sharp here. So just want to give everybody a heads up, and we'll make the change. Hey, deja vu? I feel like I just saw you.
Morning, Chair Baker. Would you
Thank you,
like to
Mr. Chair.
move your bill?
Members. Yep, thank you very much. I present and I want to move House File 4598 to bring this bill up to current standard. As you know, yesterday we heard this bill in front of our committee, and DLI as the agency has requested a technical fix to our building code administration yesterday. And earlier this week, the Workers' Comp Advisory Council voted to propose their bill this week again in 2026, and it was approved unanimously. I have Commissioner Blissenblock here today to kind of explain that part of it. So the plan is today, as we nearing kind of this end of this session, what we want to do is we literally don't have the time to get new jackets for the new bill that we typically do. So we're going to bring in our worker comp language into this bill today, into 4598, and hopefully to the general register next. So with that, Mr. Chair and members, I'd like to turn it over to the Commissioner for explaining how the bill is, what it does, and any other comments she has. Thank you.
Commissioner Blissenbach.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nicole Blissenbach. I serve as the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry, and I'm here to testify in support of House File 4598, the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council bill. The bill contains 14 sections related to workers' compensation in chapters 79, 175A, and 176. Everything included in this bill received unanimous support from the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. You should also have in your materials a letter signed by myself, Doug Loon, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, and Bernie Burnham, the Minnesota AFL-CIO President, expressing support for this bill. Specifically, the bill makes the following changes. Sections 1 through 6 describe changes to the Workers' Compensation Reinsurance Association's process for excess surplus distributions and deficiency assessments and other technical changes to the WCRA governing statutes under Chapter 79, specifically in
No, I made a mistake. So just hold 1 second.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair, I forgot to move the A1 amendment and the DE, so I want to make sure that we're on the same page. That was my mistake. So, Mr. Chair, what I'd like to do to get the bill in the form of what it needs to be is to have the committee approve the DE2 amendment, which is in your packets, is what you're kind of referring to, my fault, Commissioner. We'll do the second A1 amendment separately maybe. So if we could just move the DE2 first.
Chair Baker, I believe we have to do the A3 first.
The A2, or I have a DE2?
A3 before we do the DE2.
Okay, let's do the A3 first then, Mr. Chair, that'd be fine.
What nonpartisan staff is telling me.
I have it as A2, but either one.
Now she's saying it's the DE first. So DE2 first.
Thank you. I'd like to move the DE2 amendment to get the bill in the shape I need it to have. Mr. Chair and members?
Chair Pinto?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and then I think now that the DE2 is on the table, now we move the A3, vote on the A3, and then we'll vote on the amended DE2.
Thank you.
Okay. So now that the DE is on the table, we're going to do the
Well,
A3 first.
we need to move the DE, right?
We did.
We did move the
Moved it?
Yep.
And then I need to move the A3?
A3
There it is. I got it marked as
to
A.
the DE2.
So moved, yes?
Yes.
So yes, now we're doing the A3.
We're good to go, so we've approved that.
No, we got to vote on it.
Usually I like
Any
to hear a gavel.
So we're,
any member questions? Representative Schultz.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll help get us back on track.
Thank you.
Chair Baker, the A3 amendment to the DE2, does that get the DE2 into the form that you would like it?
Yes, it does.
Anything further, Representative Schultz? Thank you. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now we are official move.
We're official.
Thank you.
We're good.
Sorry, Matt, now I think we need to vote, I'm seeing Representative Schultz
The
nodding.
DE2?
We need to vote on the amended DE2 now.
Okay, all those in favor of the DE2 as amended?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
All right, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner, my bad. And again, this is hopefully the most complicated thing of our day.
All right.
All right,
I hope
thank you
so.
very much.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So referring back to sections 1 through 6, these changes to the Workers' Compensation Reinsurance Association's process were reviewed by both the Department of Labor and Industry and Commerce before presentation to the Work Comp Advisory Council and ultimate vote. Section 7 authorizes the use of active compensation judges from the Court of Administrative Hearings for Workers' Compensation Court of Appeals cases under Section 175A.05. If the Work Comp Court of Appeals does not have a quorum available to hear a case, including from retired judges as currently allowed under the law, the Work Comp Court of Appeals may, with consent from the Chief Judge of the Court of Administrative Hearings, assign an active workers' compensation judge from CAH to hear the case at WCCA. Section 8 adds psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners to the list of providers that can diagnose workers' compensation-related post-traumatic stress disorder under Minnesota Statute Section 176.011, Subdivision 15D. Section 9 updates a notification requirement for employee attorney retainer agreements under Section 176.081. This amendment is a technical correction to coincide with the 2024 legislative amendments that updated the maximum fees for attorneys in this section of law. The notice requirements in Subdivision 9 were not updated to reflect the new maximum fees at that time, so this amendment resolves that conflict. Section 10 amends the dollar amount multipliers for permanent partial disability impairment ratings in Minnesota Statute Section 176.101, Subdivision 2A, Paragraph B. The amounts for each rating band are raised to account for an estimated $11 million increase to PPD benefits as agreed upon by the council. Section 11 clarifies that a witness for an employer's examination must be an unpaid witness. Additionally, each party must defray the costs of that party's witness. Section 12 amends the time frame for an employer or insurer that has commenced payment of compensation after receipt of a notice or knowledge that the employee's disability is not the result of a personal injury to terminate the payment of workers' compensation benefits by filing a notice of denial of liability. Specifically, the time frame is lengthened from the current 60 days to 90 days. Section 13 relates to clarifications regarding issuing decisions based on stipulated facts in Section 176.322. And finally, Section 14 repeals items from Chapter 79 that are related to the reorganization of the WCRA changes I described above. I want to thank the Work Comp Advisory Council members for their work to get to this agreement. The members engaged in hours of respectful discussions and ultimately reached an agreement with meaningful change. I also want to acknowledge Representative Berg and Chair Baker, who served as legislative liaisons to the Work Comp Advisory Council. And thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill today.
Very good. Chair Baker.
That's all I have. If there's any questions or anyone else that want to speak to this, but I think, again, we have a unanimous support of this from both management and labor, and we stand for questions, Mr. Chair.
Any member questions? Chair Pinto.
Yeah, I'll just thank Chair Baker and Representative Berg for their service on the WCAC, and we urge members to support the bill. Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions. Would you like to renew your motion to move 4598 as amended
I would like to do that, Mr. Chair.
to the general register, correct?
To the general register, yes.
Very good. Members, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We've got a final presentation today by the Greater MSP. I'd like to welcome them to the testifying table, if I could. As they make their way forward, I want to just say that I was able to attend an event, and I think Chair Pinto was at this event too, a couple, maybe 6-8 weeks ago. And it was inspiring to me. It was a really well-presented overview of what we see in Minnesota, but this is large companies, large CEOs, medium-sized companies that are really doing a lot of really amazing things here in the greater Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So I want to welcome our folks today to the table. I know we have Peter Frosch and Matt Lewis from Greater Min MSP here today. I want to welcome you to the table and thank you for my accepting my invitation to join that same message that I sort of heard here a few weeks back. So welcome, and please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. That event that you attended was at the Guthrie Theater.
That's
There was
right.
a lot of drama. We'll try to replicate some of that in this environment today. My name is Peter Frosch. I am the CEO of Greater MSP, the cross-sector partnership working to grow the economy and create more good jobs for everyone in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region and increasingly across the state, where we partner with economic development entities from Duluth to Rochester and Mankato to St. Cloud. Greater MSP is a nonpartisan 501c3 that combines over 300 cities, counties, companies, universities, foundations, and nonprofits. They all choose to be part of this partnership, not to advocate, but to roll up their sleeves, create a shared vision of the future, and take action as a big team to make that vision a reality. So we're builders and solvers. There are 50 projects in motion at any given time, and I'm glad to talk more about the shape that action takes. But the big idea is that Greater MSP is the team focused on the future and building Minnesota's next economy, an economy that is more inclusive, more competitive, more environmentally sustainable, and faster growing than the economy we have today. And we call that greater growth. So thank you for inviting me to discuss how we can grow faster and compete better in order to build a stronger Minnesota.
Mr. Frosch, could you pull that microphone in a little bit closer too?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll lean in. Is this better? Great. The view I have to share is based on over 1,000 at-bats competing against other U.S. states and regions for jobs and investment. I have no asks of the committee today, but instead a message that is both urgent and exciting. Our region and state are not growing fast enough today to maintain our quality of life or drive economic inclusion. But we have a bold strategy to put Minnesota on the right path, and that strategy will get us where we need to be when more leaders and entities rally around it. But it really starts at step one, the concept of economic growth. And as you heard at the Guthrie, there's new thinking about economic growth that's gaining momentum across the state. And it starts with recognizing the economy is not a fixed pie. Someone doesn't have to lose for someone else to win. We can build an economy that expands the pie for everyone. When the economy grows, more good jobs are created, meaning Minnesota workers and families have more opportunity and higher wages. A growing economy moves more Minnesota families into the middle class. A growing economy also increases tax revenue for local and state government, so government has more good choices to invest in priorities like education and public safety, and less pressure to raise taxes on existing residents and businesses. The success of Minnesota families and Minnesota businesses are not in opposition, they are aligned. In fact, they're interdependent because to be the best state in the country to raise a family, Minnesota has to have one of the nation's strongest economies. Minnesotans, I think as we know, have come to expect a nation-leading quality of life, but there is no state in America that can sustain a leading quality of life without a leading economy. Now, it's also true that growth doesn't automatically deliver shared prosperity, and that's why we're focused on greater growth. There are many examples of this in America and beyond. Over the past decade, many American states grew faster than Minnesota, but choose not to invest in their people and communities in the way Minnesota does. But the point is, they have the choice to do so. Without a vibrant, competitive, and growing economy, Minnesota will not have the choices we want in the years ahead to invest in our people. To make our values real, we need a strong economy. And I think perhaps in part, that's why we're having this conversation today. We're starting to feel that pressure. I believe you have some materials, some slides, and so I'll kind of start speaking to some of those now. How is Minnesota's economy doing?
Mr. Frosch, if you could too, as we normally put them up on the screen, but I guess we missed the computer connection. So if you could, when you're flipping to a certain page, let us know where you're at so we can kind of follow along. But
Okay.
we do have the packets. Thank you.
Great, so I'll narrate this. We're getting to the first chart with lines that go up and to the right. For decades, Minnesota had an above-average economy that gave us the option of investing in a high quality of life. But increasingly, that is not the situation. For over a decade, Minnesota's economic engine has been slowing. So the first slide, the next three slides start to demonstrate this. As of 2025, our state's economic performance on key metrics, including GDP growth, job growth, and household income, are below the national average.
Mr. Frosch, could you just show us which page you're on?
Yes, so
There's no numbers on them either. I apologize.
real gross domestic product is the
U.S.
first
and Minnesota?
slide.
Thank you very much.
So you see the divergence there between how the country is growing on average and how the state is growing and how that gap has opened up. The second slide on employment shows the gap that's opened up in employment growth. And then the third slide on real median household income, because that's where it really hits home. We are still above the national average in income, but those lines are starting to narrow, and we're headed towards the median on national income, and that's not where we want to be. The point of these 3 slides is that growth produces jobs, and job growth pushes up income, and income is what affordability is all about. So over the past decade, we consistently grew more slowly than the national average, and that those years of slow growth have compounded, and we now need to play catch up. So economically, we're falling behind Colorado, Massachusetts, Washington State, and many others. Now that is not what, yep.
We're gonna plug it in for you. If you want to actually use the screen, you can just move that forward along.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay.
Our technical moment. But that's not what any Minnesotan wants to hear, because Minnesotans expect to lead. So to get back on the leadership track, we need to transform our economy. And that starts with setting a transformational aim. So now we'll all get on the same page. We'll look at I'll refer you to the slide after median household income. Well, this gets called up. So last month, what Chairs Baker and Pinto heard at the Guthrie was Greater MSP leaders, again in foundations and companies and elsewhere, announcing a new ambition to move Minnesota into the top 10 U.S. states for economic growth over the next 10 years. And that's what this slide lays out. Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, is that why it is? Okay. Maybe we can't do it then. We can't do it then. That's all right. Sorry. Just continue, Mr. Frosch. We tried.
Keep working through it.
That's all right. We'll get through it. Yep.
Okay. So,
So you're on the achieving top 10.
top 10.
Right.
Yep. So moving to the top 10 would require roughly doubling the state's annualized rate of growth from what it had been over the past decade, from 1.7% to roughly 3.1%. Over the next decade, that higher growth rate would add about $100 billion to the state's economy, produce tens of thousands more good jobs, and a broader tax base, delivering hundreds of millions in additional public revenue. This top 10 aim is a hard break with incrementalism. It will challenge every partner in every sector to think and act in new, bolder ways. And we believe the evidence shows that this is a necessary challenge, and it's one that we're excited to meet. As you maybe flip to the next slide, one that has the Brookings Metro on it, takes a team. There's a conversation happening across America right now. This is not just a Minnesota question. Whether your economy is not growing as quick as you want, as we're having a conversation here, or you're a state that is growing quickly, every state should be thinking about transformation, because the way the national global economy works is changing so quickly. No one's really standing in a safe place would be one way to talk about it. We've been working with the Brookings Institution in Washington for years, and they've been studying what's going on across the country. They've been studying the work that Greater MSP is doing, and we've been part of a national cohort having these conversations. So there's an America discussion taking place. And where the Brookings Institution is landing, and this is what's represented here, is this idea that regions and states should be focused on transformation. That's the big idea. Small things are not what we need to be doing right now. We need to be focused on big things. And that different states have different opportunities as we think about America's opportunity. But one of the big ideas they're putting forward is a reality we've seen here, which is it takes a team to transform. So you see, business industry, nonprofits, government, higher education. This is part of transformation, is rethinking how we work together to align strategies and do bigger things that no sector can do alone. Everybody has their plans, but what everybody's doing today is not adding up to the big change that we need to see. That's true in other parts of the country as well. On the next slide, where it says from disinvestment to investment, we have a case study from Chicago. So I'm going to talk about a couple of sectors in a minute. An area that is not central to our strategy, quantum computing, is something Chicago is going after. They're saying we want to be the best, right, we've done it, be the best in the world at quantum computing. That is an enormous bet. It's very capital intensive. And the action that is taking in Chicago is they're transforming the whole former steel zone on the lake front in Chicago into a quantum computing campus. The cost of this is billions of dollars, and it involves a lot of competing and winning. But an idea here is now we're all looking at the same picture. On the right-hand side, the idea is integrating funding from different players to build something bigger. And that idea, that architecture of how you transform and how you build is how we are doing and thinking here in Minnesota as well. And then the big idea, the big why behind all of this that Brookings helpfully brings forth is that whether you're talking about quantum computing or here medical technology and sustainable aviation fuel, this is where the good paying jobs are. When we're talking about competition and we're talking about winning for Minnesota, we're talking about getting jobs here that could be somewhere else that pay more on average. And so you see the kind of the good job box, the share of jobs paying a thriving wage, advanced industries versus locally serving industries. The point here is not we have to choose one or the other. But the point is some jobs pay a lot more. They offer more pathways to the middle class. They offer benefits. They're more resistant to automation. And they actually create other jobs in the economy. And so that's a really big idea at the heart of what we're doing. And that's the kind of work that we're focused on in this partnership. So the question is then, what is our plan for transformation? Using good data and real-world experience, we've been refining a bold strategy to transform our economy, one that not only delivers growth, but greater growth. No one gave us this strategy. We shaped it together in this partnership with thousands of people over the course of years. We combined vision and creativity and solid analysis to create a picture of where we want to play and how we want to win. The good news is Minnesota does not need to be the best at everything to have a great economy. We need to build on our existing strengths and win at the frontier of these legacy sectors. And then use our strengths to deliver growth in emerging sectors like sustainable aviation fuel, biomanufacturing, and industrial decarbonization. So, you would be familiar with med and health and clean industry and food and agriculture and technology and headquarters. This strategy enumerates the subsectors that are connected to the global economy where there's going to be a lot of growth over the next 10 and 20 and 30 years. That's where the good jobs are going to come from. That's where the prosperity can be built. And so maybe in the last generation, we succeeded in building and winning in a lot of these areas. But if we want to have the same level of prosperity and have it for more people over the next 20 and 30 years in Minnesota, we've got to do that again. We've got to compete and win at the frontier. This is a clearer, bolder, more forward-looking strategy than anything this region has ever had. I think it's cause for genuine excitement because this is not a paper exercise. It's in motion and becoming real. So good data and strategy are important, but effective action is what matters most. So to activate a strategy this bold, we had to innovate new ways of working. We built hubs, not programs, but powerful coalitions where industry, higher ed, government, and workforce providers align to do big things they can't do alone. Today, these hubs include MedTech 3.0, MBOLD for food and agriculture, and the Minnesota Sustainable Aviation Fuel Hub. In SAF, Minnesota is leading the nation in a race to build an entirely new clean industry from scratch, an industry worth over $20 billion and 20,000 new jobs to the state in the coming years. We build that by taking a host of actions, including by competing and winning jobs and investments in those sectors against other states and countries. Who we compete against depends on the sector and the project. Sometimes it's against border states. In medical technology, it's often Massachusetts, California, or North Carolina. In agriculture, it might be Indiana or North Carolina. In advanced technology and clean energy, it might be Colorado. All of these states are growing faster than Minnesota, in part because they are extremely focused and organized to compete, and they treat expanding economic opportunity as a top bipartisan priority. So how do we compete and win today? We are having success beating other states and even countries, especially in areas like medical technology, where we've had over 90 expansions in Minnesota in the last few years alone, many of which you've read about in the papers, Philips and Boston Scientific and Solventum. And we're winning because we're offering the most competitive opportunity. We recently won the headquarters relocation of a fast-growing agriculture company called Pivot Bio, which will be one of Minnesota's next billion-dollar businesses. But we're not winning as often as we could and need to. And we're losing hundreds of quiet competitions every year when businesses based in Minnesota choose to expand to other states instead of here, within manufacturing centers or technology hubs. Good-paying jobs that we want are going elsewhere. Now, when we win, it's often because of our highly educated workforce, our green electricity, our awesome international airport, and other world-class infrastructure. When we lose, it's usually because overall costs are too high, because the permitting process is too slow or simply unclear, because we aren't keeping pace developing the most critical workforce skills, and sometimes it's because we don't actually have the site for the project. Last year, the biggest project we lost was because we didn't have a ready site in the metro/state. This was a $4 billion, 8,000 job project with average wages of $120,000. We are in the running for all the other reasons we discussed, but if there's not a place that's fit for purpose for that project, we can't compete. Getting a little better every year on cost and permitting and workforce and sites would be a game changer for Minnesota's future. And just most importantly, we need to start now, this session, focusing on these things to put the economy on a new growth trajectory and to sustain the quality of life we love so much in the state. So before I take questions, here are just a few potential ways to advance this dialogue with the legislature, which I really appreciate. One, we could work together to find new ways to learn together faster. The economy and society are just changing faster than we've ever seen. And the economy is complex and it's interconnected. The implications of any policy change are not always intuitive. Those of us practitioners want to help answer questions and stress test early ideas when it's helpful, because sometimes well-intentioned policy moves can undermine Minnesota's competitiveness accidentally, but significantly. Second, encouragement to hold more meetings like this on broad topics like where global demand is growing, or how we use AI to our benefit, or what other states are doing that's working in workforce and infrastructure and business development. And third, an encouragement to be targeted, bold and targeted areas. Again, Minnesota doesn't need to win in every place, but we will have to be purposeful and go big in the areas we want to win if we're going to win. Because in some cases, we're competing against countries, not just other states. New tools like the Minnesota Forward Fund are great examples of relatively new, highly effective tools that has really brought the state to the table. So thank you for this time. Minnesota is busy at work building our next economy. There is progress, but we need to accelerate this effort to get where we want to go. And it would be my pleasure to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frosch, for this presentation. I know one of the things that I had heard, and maybe you can expand on this a little bit at the Guthrie event, was just the commitment from our private partners on the kind of investment that they were going to do. Can you expand a little bit about that, about sort of the commitment of, you know, I think it was billions of dollars in the future to really make sure that we get that catapult effect to try to get Minnesota growing faster than what we are now today. Are you able to expand on that just a little bit?
Sure. I think one of the ideas to pull on that I just mentioned is one of the foundations that we need to build on to be successful and create the Minnesota we want is we need companies that are based in Minnesota growing here. That's a simple idea. In some cases, that growth is incremental and hard to see. In other cases, it's strategic. So something that was mentioned from the stage that night, the CEO of Ecolab announced that Ecolab would be investing, I think, at least $500 million to expand their Egan R&D facility, which is going to be a global center for Ecolab's kind of health research. That could have gone anywhere, not just in America, but in the world. And in part because of Ecolab's commitment to be part of this strategy, but also because a lot of other players, including the state of Minnesota, work together to help make that a competitive choice for Ecolab. It was mentioned that General Mills had an R&D expansion last year. The Mortenson built an R&D center. Solventum's investment is an R&D center. There's a bit of a thread here that we have an innovation economy, and we've traditionally won by doing smart new things first. And as we think about what a headquarters economy looks like in the 21st century, these R&D centers you could think of as kind of useful anchors to help keep that cluster of leadership here. So there's a pattern there, and there's a strategy around R&D centers. So that would be one answer to the question.
Thank you. You had mentioned, too, some of the tools that are working well, the Forward Fund, to help invest and match dollars for some private investments. What are you hearing from your membership, I guess, your colleagues, about how is there a item or two, one or two items that are sort of some of the biggest hurdles right now that we can try to work together on from a government standpoint to make sure that our companies are able to really robustly move forward? Is there anything you can share with us now? I think having this kind of presentation earlier in the session might be better in the future versus the very end, but I'm just kind of curious about our biggest companies, our headquarter companies that are really wound here really well in Minnesota. We have a gift because we have so many good companies here with really good paying jobs. I like that slide that showed the difference of those well-established companies. I think that's a real factor. But I want to make sure, as we represent one of those spokes on that wheel, it takes a team to transform. We're the government side of things, and we want to make sure that we do provide those tools. And I think we do have some good tools that help you. If you have any thoughts and want to share anything else about just what is working well and what's not, we're always open to that conversation. Anything you want to add to that?
Bless you. Something that we've learned, a reality, is that when these decisions that companies will make that end up creating investment and jobs and opportunity in Minnesota, these are at least 5-year decisions. They're often 10-year, 20-year, 30-year decisions. So essentially, they're making a bet on where a place is going. And so, that kind of cuts in all kinds of different ways. But one of the big ideas for the state, and as a part of the team, is a stable, clear sense of direction is very valuable. Because companies are saying, like, well, this is what you're telling me this year, but what about next year, and where we're going to be in 5 years and 10 years? And these are sophisticated entities, and they understand that there are nuances in politics. But where's Minnesota trying to go? How is Minnesota trying to win? What is the vision for this state? And how does it see, in this case, maybe the private sector or certain sectors and industries as a part of that future? That seems like a simple thing, and it doesn't actually cost anything, but it's very important because it's kind of the beginning of that conversation. So clarity around where the state wants to go together, and then having the kind of showing the proof points. I mentioned just small changes in the right direction on cost and permitting. These things matter because what we've seen also, business is bet on trends. Is it going down or is it going up? And so when we can demonstrate that, listen, we're going in the right direction, there's a commitment to keep moving in that direction, that often is actually quite useful. So even small moves consistently in the right direction really do matter.
Thank you. Stability, predictiveness, that's what I'm hearing you say today. And thank you. So I want to also welcome other member questions. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciated the presentation a lot, and I hope that we are able to have a robust dialogue, not only here, but we need to have that conversation more often here. And I know that that's what I hear from folks just like yourself across the state, that that not having a common sense of direction and being, on a bipartisan basis committed to delivering on what that clear vision is, has been one of my disappointments too. So I want you to know that, for starters. I think you outlined for us that spaces in healthcare and agriculture and some levels of tech are the industries that you believe that we should focus on or that we are focusing on. Can you confirm that for me?
Mr. Frosch.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are there any other industries that you didn't highlight that we should be seeking to have here in Minnesota that our state currently doesn't focus on?
Mr. Frosch.
That's a great question, Mr. Chair, members. One, the strategy is not meant to name every last thing we have in our economy. And there are a lot of things, everything in our economy does matter. And so this is really like, where do we want to win? There are some new things that haven't been part of our economy in the past, like you see hypersonics, which is on this page, which kind of raises the question of what's that? There's over $1 billion U.S. DoD investment that's going into Dakota County to build a testing center that is an entirely new industry in the state of Minnesota, and it has a lot to do with computation and has to do with data. That's very exciting, and it's about the University of Minnesota and a lot of partners coming together to do something that's significant for the country. So that would be an example of something that's new, strategic, and really important. One of the points I was making is that when we're in food and agriculture, for instance, not a new topic in Minnesota, that's the point. But there are things like protein sustainability, which is how do you actually feed 9 billion people on the planet in a way that doesn't overtax the global ecosystem, which is one of the hardest to solve climate problems the world faces. That is a really big business, solving that problem. And this region and state is getting into that business. And this Embold hub that we built, which involves the University of Minnesota and General Mills and all kinds of other players, we want to be the place where those problems, those most important problems, are figured out. Minnesota likes to have a purpose-driven economy where people who are kind of mission people. And so one way that we're talking about this work is, as you look at this slide, you can also think about it as missions. So in med and health, like our mission in this generation is to build the next frontier of med and health technology to solve and cure things that have not been cured. That's like a Minnesota thing, and we are set up to do it, and we have to go and do it. In clean industry, our mission is to lead North America's clean transition. Not to talk about it, but to build it, to transform the way everything works. We're actually positioned in Minnesota to not just be a model to inspire other states, but to be a global player in changing the way the world works, which is exciting. So these are truly bigger things than we've talked about in the past that we are genuinely positioned to do. But when I talk about kind of the leveling up that's required, it's like, this is new stuff. And so connecting it back to the Forward Fund, for example, we can't compete and win the big and core investments it takes to build something like that without the state playing. So the Forward Fund, one of the investments that the Forward Fund made is in BioMade, which maybe is familiar or unfamiliar to you. This is a U.S. Department of Defense Institute on biomanufacturing. The Pentagon determined years ago that there were 10 areas America had to have capability in for security, for economic security. Biomanufacturing is one of them. It's a new industry. The idea is basically making everything out of, if that's not pharmacology, out of cellulosic inputs, from cosmetics to car parts. That would change the way that the whole world works, and Minnesota is now got this asset that's being built in Maple Grove. that's connected to the world, and we could be using agricultural inputs, mostly residuals, waste streams, and turning that into products and then shipping them out to the Port of Duluth to the world. So that's what we envision over the next 5 and 7 years, and we're excited about that.
Any follow-up, Representative Schultz?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We need people like you to get elected to this legislature. And I said,
Well, where does he
you.
live? What's like a?
I said like you so that you don't feel the personal need to do it. But that's the truth of the matter, that there's not enough big talk around this place. And we're sometimes too limited, including myself, to the ideas that we find underneath this dome. And there's so much growth that Minnesota can see. You highlighted a lot there, and I also do want to highlight, and it's true, even this week, right? MinPost had a big article saying that the Pentagon is ramping up spending, right, that's going to boost Minnesota companies. And you're highlighting that in Department of Defense spending too. So that's a benefit to Minnesota. You said one other thing in your presentation here that stuck out to me, and I think you intended it to. And it was this challenge with citing of potential investments in our state. Can you go into greater detail for us as to what the challenge is? And is it a state problem? Is it a local problem? Is it citing as it relates to closeness to literally Minneapolis, St. Paul? Is it closeness to energy infrastructure? Is it closeness to maybe vast open spaces? What are the siting challenges that Minnesota has, especially as it relates to states and countries that we're competing with?
Mr. Frosch.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you for the question. This is a statewide issue/opportunity. And because of all the work that's underway and the strategy and the demand, what we see is when market-ready sites are developed, they are filled and jobs are created. So this is not a speculative idea. This is a time-sensitive idea. One of the ideas is land is not a site. So a site is a piece of land that somebody owns that has some decision-making power over the project. It's connected to utilities, wastewater, electricity. It has whatever relevant infrastructure. Maybe it's rail, maybe it's road. But the idea is a site is someplace where something can go. It's not a kind of someday something could happen there. I've been at Greater MSP for over 13 years. And when I started, many things in the world economy were different, but one of them was the time frame. I remember when people would call and be like, in a couple of years, we're looking to do this. Now it's, what do you have this week? The decisions are immediate, and so the pressure on being ready, that's kind of being a goal, like be future ready. And so these sites are not, there are a lot of, let's say, smaller sites around every part of the state. We're talking about the big ones, maybe 100+ acres. That does not always mean that we're not talking about core urban areas. There are actually many significant redevelopment opportunities that exist in Hennepin and Ramsey County. But these sites would be, the land to be acquired, permitted. One of the ways to be more competitive and be ready is actually have some of the kind of permitting in process. And this is really a speed issue. One of the ways to win or lose is on speed, and that is not about compromising any existing laws or anything, but it is about being able to move with pace and on some clear time frame. Sites have to have, it is access to talent, it might be access to suppliers or customers. It really depends on the project. One of the ideas that hasn't come up yet is electricity. 3 years ago, we never talked about electricity. It was just a given that we have the electricity we need. One, Minnesota's renewable electricity is a competitive advantage. And the way that we're looking to develop, and especially in these clean industries, requires renewable electricity. But that's something with very long lag times. So electricity, and other infrastructure, and then sites. So we would be more competitive if we could be kind of moving more upstream and having more strategic conversations. So counties and cities and the state could be stepping in a few years ahead of time to start doing the work that only those public entities will do. So when we talk about team and roles, a lot of the public role can happen up front. There's a development in Bloomington. It's called SICK. It's a sensor company. It's a German company. But the region in Minnesota, won that North American headquarters, which has already expanded again since in the last couple of years, because Hennepin County and the Met Council and the state of Minnesota had been preparing that site around the Mall of America to cross the airport for years. And so we basically won that project against Houston, Texas with the site. So really important, has to happen upstream. And there might be tools that the state doesn't have today. And one of the issues we see from cities and counties is that they're risk averse, and that there's, to be frank, a lot of political pressure against developing a site that then might not immediately be filled. So how might we address that? Because we'll never be ready if we don't have those sites. So that's just something to work through, and other states have programs that address that.
Representative Schultz, follow up?
Yeah,
Then we get
appreciate
some other
this.
questions. Yeah.
Hopefully this has been
this is
helpful.
great.
But my question here is, so what then is the specific state role? You mentioned a lot of the local municipalities, right? Representative Hussein and I are trying to get good jobs for his people and to make sure that we bring, we revitalize the Sears site that's right next to here, right? What is the state's role in all this, and how can we around this table, whether it's this year or next year, what can we be doing to help with this specific issue?
Mr. Frosch.
Chair, members of the committee, if we would love to follow up with some more specific examples of what other states are doing. Red and blue and purple states all across the country have been working on this for a long time. Site cleanup, utility extension. I mean, this is a lot of the business that's already going on, but maybe doing it with more intention. I mean, a good question to ask that we haven't all sat down and look at the strategy and say, what are the most high potential areas, of the region and the state? Electricity is only, electricity is in some areas. You already have infrastructure in some areas. So it's not a blank page conversation. Even starting to just use a map and identify some zones, and then working with counties and cities, being more thoughtful and strategic and kind of practical would be a great next step.
Thank you, very helpful. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate this conversation. And one thing I love to sort of hear more about is, as we think about this in this committee and just in general, I've heard a lot like Minnesota is doing pretty well in the headquarters economy thing and not so great in the local startup and in the small business support. And I think some of that is because we often take a one-size-fits-all approach when we talk about business, right? And then when we're in our policy approaches or in investment approaches, usually the conversation has been dominated, my experience is often in some of those things that are more about attracting big businesses, headquarter economies. And I'm wondering, to my first question, I guess, just to sort of give you a space, when we think about what it looks like in the next 10 years, where do specifically small local businesses fit into this strategy?
Mr. Frosch.
Mr. Chair, great question. I'll just start big picture. It's all part of the economy, and it all matters because it all generates revenue and jobs. But I think that's actually an important starting point rather than saying we have to pick or, this is small business versus big business. I think if we think about our economy as a portfolio and then understanding the relationships among those pieces. So one, we know that small business is an immediate priority because of what we've experienced in the state over the past 100 days. And in part out of recognition of how important small business and how important local small business is, the Greater MSP Partnership has been working with the Minneapolis Foundation and a host of companies to raise an emergency fund which is already gone out to 900 small businesses in the region and the state. And I think we're on track for, to maybe double that over the next few months. That's, of course, just a triage step, but it's really necessary. And it's a recognition of how important these are, because this is about quality of life. This is about the vibrancy of corridors. It's about access to the economy, especially for immigrant communities. So it's critically important. The slide that I show here from Brookings, there's a relationship economically between the advanced industry jobs, and whether it's a big company or a scaling company, it's kind of like what sector are those jobs in? So Pivot Bio, for instance, I mentioned, this is kind of ag technology company. It's not a huge company yet, but it's growing very fast. And its jobs are connected to kind of this advanced nitrogen technology. They pay well. So those jobs create more jobs in the economy. And so there's analysis, economic analysis. We can also follow up with some of this about the kind of indirect jobs that come from, say, the investments in hypersonics in Dakota County we're seeing already leading to small business vitality and population growth in that area. So the point is they're connected, and there's some causality that flows from growing the most competitive parts of your economy into you get down to the neighborhood and the corridor level. But it's obviously all critically important. You mentioned startups, and I would just think about the category there. You have kind of local small business, and then you have startup companies that have a scaling potential. So last week I had a great conversation with a startup called Carba, which some of you have heard about. It's not a secret, it's been in the paper, but they have this technology around biochar that the city of Minneapolis is already involved in. This is a really important potential global solution to climate change. They are a small company at this point, but they could be a very big company. And so we're working with them and working to connect them to research, to venture capital, to all the things they need to grow, because they could be a $1 billion company. They could be a $10 billion company here. And it's not just about, it's about having pillars like that create lots of jobs that are in these core sectors. So like they could help us lead North America's clean transition. So startups that scale up are really important to this work. And so capital, that's where capital comes in pulling capital in, not just locally, but from around the country and around the world to support those scale-ups.
Representative Freeman?
Thank you. Sorry, I thought you said Representative Pino. So I guess I appreciate that. And I think to sort of Representative Schultz said, I think one of the questions for us here is what is the state intervention, and whether it's resources or regulation or deregulation or sort of creating that environment. And what I didn't hear and what I would like to hear is I don't actually think that and I don't think this is what you meant, but it sounds a little bit like if we focus on the big, it'll trickle to the small. And I think that in both the economics of people and in the economics of businesses, I don't think that that's what we have seen happen. I think, in fact, and Representative Schultz and I are working on a grocery bill. In some cases, the way that things are structured is that we have seen the big gobble up and actually create no more room for the small. And so when I think about it, and I really appreciate you bringing up the last 100 days, because what we saw when we're thinking about the vibrancy of our communities, the workers, the employers, what we saw was local businesses really heroically, and in some cases, stand up for their workers and their communities and sort of do double down. And then what we have seen is some of the Minnesota-based multinational companies do the exact opposite, like Target, right, who wouldn't even stand up for their their citizen workers. And so I think that one of the things, just as we think about the value to our communities, both the economic value and I think the values that come in terms of, as you're talking about, that expand from communities that have a local grocery store and have a vibrant, hospitality and vibrant and connected hardware stores. that kind of sort of service industry, and I think it's a good distinction between sort of the startup corporation that is looking to scale up and maybe, become a multinational corporation, and the folks who are really invested in, and their business model is about serving communities. And I think oftentimes we hear about, when we talk about the economy, we talk about the attraction of and how do we bring those big multinational and national companies, and how do we scale up our industries in order to become that. And it feels entirely disconnected from the conversation about the local governments and the local investment that you lifted up. And so it would be helpful as we move forward and as we go into another policymaking year next year. I do think we need to think about our small local business agenda collectively, together, because we all have those folks in our communities. We all talk about those folks in our communities. And I actually think that politics aside, what we hear from them is different than what we hear when the business partnership comes in, or what we hear from when these multinational companies come in. And so as you all are thinking about how do we create a economic opportunity and inclusive opportunity and accelerated growth, I would like us to start centering the local economy piece as part of it, because I do think as it relates to us and what state intervention looks like, I think that's the place where we're seeing and we're hearing the most help and intervention needed. And I do think that is a different set of strategies and a different set of challenges than we see with our national and multinational growth. And I do not mean to say we should pit it against each other, but I do think we should prioritize. And I think prioritizing the small local businesses in our community, to me, is where my priorities would be.
I didn't hear a question. I don't think, right? Representative Greenman? Okay. My only comment to that, before I go to Representative Wayne Johnson, I think all of them are important. I think what I'm hearing is that we need to be welcoming to all, small, medium, large, because again, when we lost that one company, that 8,000 employees, huge investment, that would have been 8,000 more paid workers in Minnesota that would have supported our small businesses too. I think it all just really adds up, and we've got to encourage and welcome every size we can. I think sight and speed is what I'm hearing today. These are important things that legislators need to hear. Representative Wayne Johnson, again, we've got 15 minutes, and I got 4 left on the list, so let's keep it somewhat short, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. One thing I think is important to remember, that every one of those jobs that could have been created is a future business that creates a new job. So that's the way to think about it too, is that it's not a small business right now, but it's an opportunity that somebody came in, learned the trade, and then moving on. One of the things I'd like to just touch on is that when I was on the city council in 2016 for Cottage Grove, there was a decision made that changed Cottage Grove. And it was that decision I think you touched on, was that taking that tough vote and using the EDA to go in and buy property in what became the industrial park. It changed the whole direction from a city that went from out there begging, please come, to making shovel-ready property, bringing in internet, water, road, and stuff like that. Once they made that decision, all of a sudden it was becoming people coming to them saying, it was time, we're ready, you have a site, we could start tomorrow, the permitting process goes. And so that is the difference, as you mentioned, between begging and just answering the phone. And it changes communities, and I know Cottage Grove wasn't the only one, but that's what the different communities, and that's where the different local communities, I know you work with the counties and the cities a lot, and that makes a lot of changes. With that said, I have, that's a great direction. So that's where it bothers me, is that you mentioned that business that decided they couldn't come here because of a site. You know, we have political, we have all the different things. But is there, and maybe you said it, maybe I missed it, what was the reason that there wasn't a site available for that company? Was it railroad? Was it just roads? Was it internet? What was it?
Mr. Frosch.
Simply 5 years ago, the conversation didn't happen between some city and some county and some states in the state to make a site. The work hadn't been done. Sometimes, private developers can do this as well. It doesn't always have to be public. But a few years ago, no one did the thing that would have been required, so that last year we would have said, how about here? And again, with that project, the talent base, all the other connections to other sectors, we had a lot of things going for us. And we literally lose sleep over things like that because we know what it means for the whole state not to have that kind of opportunity, which is why we bring it up today. We will lose this year, we'll lose next year on the site issue, but we can win in 28 and 29 and 30 if we start doing some things differently this year.
And just
Well,
one more
quick follow-up.
thing.
Yep.
Thanks. And I think it's very important moving forward too, is we as a state need to define in our own idea, so then we can pass on to you what we believe winning is. Is winning getting a $1 billion company to come to us once in a while that already probably had connections here? Or is winning $4 or $5 billion companies on a regular basis? So we just need to have that idea and that to say, are we, and what investment and direction and work that we want to put in to win, and I know what I want to be clarified as a winner. Bring in those businesses that are 4, 5, 10 billion. That's winning to us, not just a $1 billion company once in a while and then holding a celebration. So thank you.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Chair Baker, and thank you for the presentation. This is just more of a general comment. I don't have a specific question for you, but as an educator for over 20 years, when I look at things like this, I think about pathways and I think about how we're going to have to start looking at skills, training, and how we can set up our education system so that we can get the workforce that you need. How do we look at how we can build those public-private partnerships so that we can have our kiddos matriculate through schools and be prepared for these in high-demand jobs that are high-paying. And I would be remiss in saying that as I'm looking at these industries under biotech, you need to come down and see the Hormel Institute, which is doing groundbreaking work with their Imbex Center of Bioimaging. And of course, Hormel Institute was where they discovered omega-3. So time for you to come on down and do some investments in Hormel Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. Representative Pete Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. On the broader conversation about the role that your organization plays in some of this recruitment and bringing things in, and we talked a little bit about infrastructure. How far out of a role do you see somebody like Greater MSP playing in that? Like when I think about infrastructure, you think about the land and the internet and the things like that got talked about, but I also think about housing. And if we, up in Duluth, if we brought a corporation that was going to bring 500 new jobs in, we don't have the capacity to house those folks. And then, if they do come and it draws in those people and, it drastically changes what that housing market looks like. It impacts our schools and the ability to do those types of things. So like how far out of a role do you see, somebody like Greater MSP playing in making sure that that infrastructure isn't just the ground and site that you talked about, but the community as a whole in being ready to accommodate that, including the small businesses that need to be in place in order for those bigger things to come in and be successful.
Mr. Frosch.
Thank you for the question. Good news, bad news in our world, it's all our problem, ultimately. And so you think about, because we see it all and internalize it, but this is where strategy is important. So one of the reasons to set the strategy that we talked about today is because one of the things we are doing now and in the months to come could have a conversation with, this is the infrastructure we know we will need to build these things. For example, the Port of Duluth could be more important to the state's future than it has ever been. It could be a global port that has interrelationships with Rotterdam, Liverpool. These are conversations that are underway. We could be fueling ships with green methanol, decarbonizing. It could be a whole thing. Well, that is a major infrastructure project of some kind. It wouldn't necessarily have to be public, but that is a years That takes years, and we are this year facing some positive pressure to examine how we might ship sustainable aviation fuel that's made in Minnesota, potentially out of tree trimmings, to Europe. So the demand for that infrastructure is already emerging, and that's why anticipation is essential. If we want to win, we got to decide where we want to win, anticipate what it's going to take, start doing that work, and then the wins start to add up. So we would love to have a conversation, and housing is a part of that, to be sure. I think the more we can get out of, is it this or is it this, that is not the reality we face. You have to go after demand, create an opportunity to compete for, and then it is about workforce, and it's about housing, and it's about a lot of factors all at once. So I guess the good news is it all matters.
Representative Johnson, follow up? Okay, thank you. Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. When I looked at one of the graphs with, I believe it's an IBM example, but it looks like a really critical layer. And with that $1 billion investment from the company, you have 74% also match of investment from the state, 24% is what the feds put in that example, under 0.5% from philanthropy, and then, the local is under 2%. But it kind of highlights that collaborative approach of looking at where are we going and how are we going to have, anchor businesses and then also the small businesses. I don't see it as an either or. You look at just an example down here. When I'm here, I look at the Grand Casino when I drive by all the time. That center is an anchor business in St. Paul. But if it wasn't here, many of the small businesses would have a different economic impact. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at entertainment and you look at all the different events and venues that come through because it exists, sports and arts and education and the list goes on, it makes me wonder if there's any data that you have from your experience on, how many anchor businesses the economy needs, because we have the spinoffs of several different avenues of small businesses. And the business model is, they're paying double the property tax rate too, to fund our schools, cities, counties, and townships and all that we're doing. So when we're looking at an economic model and then the schools and all of this, is there any data that gives some framework so that when you're doing these partnerships, people are aware of this, that without it, there's going to be really tough decisions made because the entire program is based on a property tax model, and property taxes just went out and they went up quite high. And so the business community is a big part of that, and I'd love your feedback on if you have any data on that of what we're seeing for different size areas. Obviously, the Minneapolis-St. Paul is a bigger region than St. Cloud or Duluth or outstate, but love your feedback on what you're seeing from data.
Mr. Frosch?
Thank you for the question. If possible, we would really appreciate the opportunity to follow up with some data. Now I can say that there are some examples of those interrelationships. And I think there's a theme that I'm hearing today about an interest in better understanding the relationship of small business as it's connected to other things in the economy, which is a very important topic. Back in 2010, during the Great Recessions, an effort started in this region called Business Bridge that most people have never heard about. And it was very large company procurement officers who said, I don't know, maybe if we just try to buy more things from Minnesota, small, medium-sized businesses, that would help create jobs. And that work went on kind of informally for over a decade. It moved in, we took it into Greater MSP about 6 years ago. And we've been doing the analysis to show that there's $12 billion has flowed into Minnesota's economy from the purchasing of the big companies from other small and medium-sized businesses in Minnesota. $12 billion. And that is an example that is real, tangible, it's happening every year, and what we're doing is trying to figure out how do we actually accelerate that and promote it. So it's a very important topic. Those interrelationships can be leveraged. And maybe you said some things that were, I don't know, exciting to a person like me. You talked about economic model. I think that's a very good concept for us to be thinking about. What is Minnesota's new economic model? You talked about frameworks. That's, how do you put some shape around these conversations we're having? I think we could come back and kind of show a framework for what the small business, relationship looks like. And what we're kind of going around this idea of it's a portfolio, and we think about the interconnections. And I know it wasn't a question before, but I'd like to go on the record as being opposed to trickle-down economics, because kind of one of the big ideas in my comments, like, this is not a set it and forget it. Minnesota is not fine, like, we're not where we need to be, but we can get where we need to go, and we can design our next economy in a way that performs better than the one today in many respects. And this is the whole greater growth idea. It will not just happen, but we're capable enough and smart enough to do it. We are doing it. That Business Bridge example is an example of like work that's been done when you actually engineer opportunity. This is one of Minnesota's superpowers. There are a lot of, we're competing against other states that have other things going for them, but we want to turn our values into a competitive advantage, and we don't want them to be a complication, right? So these are just choices in how we design things.
Thank you. Final member is Representative Co-Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was actually such a nice transition to what I was going to ask about. Just, I was hearing themes of homegrown growth versus growth from transplants. And, there's the short-term boost of getting a large company to come in from out of state. But when the chair made the reference at the beginning of this discussion to our being such a headquarters state, I believe in almost all cases, when you think about those companies, those kind of classic Minnesota headquarters, those were homegrown companies. And so I guess maybe just a comment, Mr. Frosch, and thank you for your work, about kind of to what extent are we thinking about kind of that organic growth? It seems like it has some real advantages. It may take a little bit longer, but some real advantages over kind of a short-term win of bringing a company in from out of state, and kind of just commenting on that. Thanks.
Mr. Frosch.
This is like one of the most essential fundamental questions, right? It was kind of raised earlier. Our helping Minnesota companies just continue to grow here is the base of everything. It's the fundamental. And so cost matters, permitting matters, tone, all of those things matter every day. And I mentioned those quiet competitions. That's what that is. We don't know, the people who don't, we don't know that we're competing for something. And so that is fundamental. And because this is not a choice. I mentioned we've competed for over 1,000 projects over the last decade. 80% of the projects we win are expansions, not attractions from outside the state. But the thing to recognize is they are competed. So just because a company's here doesn't mean they have to invest here. In fact, it definitely does not mean that. They are looking everywhere, and they're national global companies, and there are advantages actually sometimes for them to be elsewhere. And so we have to fight hard and work hard to win those expansions, especially in the sectors we focus on. That 20% of attraction, the reality is we're not moving enormous headquarters to Minnesota. That's just not the game we play. Now, other states do play that game. Like, that's their model. Our model is to grow things, scale things, but also keep things that we have. But the attraction is very strategic. So, for example, there was this Philips win that was announced a couple of years ago. We spent 7 years competing for a project that doesn't look that big. It's about $31 million to start. It's 100 jobs. But we competed for 7 years to win that project out of Philips headquarters in Eindhoven, Netherlands. So not a gimme. And it was worth it, and that project went in Plymouth, and they're hiring, because they're doing AI integration in med device development and research. That is the cutting edge. It's the frontier of one of the sectors we want to win. And by being connected to Philips, which is the largest med tech company in the world, that is a huge advantage for us going forward. So we're playing a long game. And I think that's one of the challenges. We're all focused on this month and next month, but being able to step back and say, this is the world we're living into. this is the future we want, this is how we're going to build it, this is the plan, and then breaking that down into what are we going to do month on month to realize that, that is kind of the thinking discipline. And that's where having an increasingly robust and ongoing dialogue with the legislature would be very helpful.
Chair Pinto, any follow-up? Thank you. And again, thank you, Mr. Frosch, for this presentation. I appreciated all the questions. I think that what I am hearing again today is it's all important, and the timing is critical. I will tell you that at a recent tour that I was at with Niron Magnetics, a perfect example of an idea that came from research at the University of Minnesota and brought to a great company in North Minneapolis, now expanded in Little Falls, Minnesota, I believe, in their Sartell, excuse me, in their industrial size level of magnet construction. And they need more. And they're looking for other sites, they're looking for other places in Minnesota, but also elsewhere. So those are the exact kind of things that we need, are these scalable things. What we need from Greater MSP going forward is make sure you tell us where we need to do our work and what is our best return on those investments. It's everything. It's from the small companies, but to hear about, you know, the port up in Duluth and just the areas of where we need to be ready for these things. It's going to take years and smart investment. I know a lot of private dollars are going to be really needed, but we need to make sure from what we can do, we need to hear from you folks that are doing this every single day, all day. You're seeing all these awards that are being made around the country and what we're winning and what we're losing. We can't afford to lose anymore. We're not growing fast enough. We have to have your help to do that. So I just want to thank you again for helping us make sure Minnesota is going to be the most competitive state we can be going forward. That's what this committee really cares about. With that, Mr. Chair, we want to talk about maybe a little bit tomorrow about what maybe the plan is ahead. I'm going to give that to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So members, a bill language has been posted on the committee website that is a proposed bill to be voted out tomorrow, proposed by Chair Baker and me. So you want to review that carefully. We will have discussion about the bill, public testimony, and then any amendments tomorrow. I think the chair and I had talked about having an amendment deadline of 5 p.m. This evening for any amendments to that bill. Of course, reach out with questions that you may have, but I think, Mr. Chair, that should cover things.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Again, I'm excited to present that bill tomorrow with everybody. I think we've got some good things in there, and I'm happy with what our committee work is going to be doing. Members, that will be all for today. Our agenda is completed, and we are adjourned.